The space station was breaking apart piece by piece. Explosions echoed through the metal halls, and the red warning lights painted the corridors in a constant flash. Smoke poured from broken vents, and the floor shook under every strike from the enemy fleet outside. Captain Elias Ward ran through the corridor with his squad of human soldiers. Their orders were simple: retreat to the hangar, board the dropships, and escape before the station collapsed completely. The battle had already been lost. The Varenians, their alien enemies, had overwhelmed the defense line, and now the humans could only survive by running. "Keep moving," Elias shouted over the noise. His voice was sharp but steady, a calm sound in the chaos. He carried his rifle in one hand, guiding his men through the fire and falling metal. They were exhausted, but they trusted him. Elias had led them through, worse before. But as they passed a ruined corridor, Elias heard something strange. It wasn't gunfire or explosions. It was softer, a high-pitched sound. Crying. He stopped in his tracks. "Captain, what are you doing?" one of his soldiers called. "The hangar's this way." Elias raised his hand to signal silence. There it was again, the sound of frightened voices, small and weak. He turned his head and saw a broken door half open on the side. Beyond it, through the smoke, he caught sight of movement. Small shadows huddled together. His heart tightened. They weren't soldiers. They weren't a threat. They were children. He pushed the door wider, and in the flickering light, he saw them clearly. 5 young Varenians, their scaled skin shimmering, faintly even in the dim light. Their large eyes were filled with terror. They were trapped in the corner of the room, pressed against the wall as if the fire and chaos outside would swallow them whole. Elias froze for a moment. The Varenians were the enemy. His orders were to retreat, not to stop. And yet, he saw nothing of an enemy in their faces. He only saw fear, the same fear he had seen in human children back home during old wars on Earth. One of the children whimpered as another blast shook the station. A piece of the ceiling fell, crashing just a meter away from them. The children screamed and covered their heads. Elias acted without thinking. He ran inside and placed himself between the falling debris and the children, using his armored back as a shield. Dust and heat rained over him, but he stood firm. "Captain, what are you doing?" his second-in-command shouted from the doorway. "They're just kids," Elias shouted back. "We're not leaving them." The soldier hesitated, torn between following orders and following his captain. Elias didn't wait. He reached out a hand toward the closest young Varenian. The child looked at him with wide eyes, unsure whether to trust the human soldier. But when another explosion rocked the walls, the little one stepped forward, clutching his hand with trembling fingers. "Good," Elias said softly. "Come on, we're getting out of here." One by one, the others followed, though still frightened. They pressed close together, moving as a small group. Elias crouched low to make himself less threatening, guiding them gently with his hands. The squad outside looked at him in disbelief. "Captain, command will court-martial you for this," one warned. "Then they can," Elias replied firmly. "I won't leave children to die, enemy or not." With the young Varenians following, Elias led his squad back into the burning corridor. Every step was dangerous. The station shook violently now, and sparks rained from the ceiling. Smoke made it hard to breathe, and fire blocked certain paths. Elias pushed through, keeping the children in the middle of their group, protecting them on all sides. They reached a collapsed section where flames cut off the way forward. Elias scanned quickly. The main route was blocked, but there was a narrow service tunnel to the side. "Through there," Elias ordered. His squad exchanged doubtful looks. The tunnel was small, barely wide enough for grown humans with their armor, but it was the only path left. He helped the children crawl through first, making sure they weren't afraid. His soldiers followed, grumbling but obeying. Elias went last, crawling through the narrow space with smoke filling his lungs. The young Varenians waited for him at the other side, their eyes fixed on him. When he emerged, covered in soot, one of them reached out and touched his sleeve lightly, as if to make sure he was real. They finally reached the hangar where chaos continued. Dropships lifted off one by one while alarms screamed. Human soldiers were boarding in a rush. When Elias appeared with the young Varenians, the hangar fell into stunned silence. "Captain Ward, what is this?" the commanding officer demanded, his face pale with disbelief. "You brought enemy young into our hangar?" "They were trapped," Elias said firmly, standing tall despite the smoke stains and exhaustion. "I wasn't going to let them burn alive." "They're the enemy," the officer snapped. "We don't risk lives for them." Elias's jaw tightened. He looked down at the children, their small frames trembling, their eyes fixed on him with absolute trust. He had protected them, and now they clung to that protection. "With respect, sir," Elias said in a steady voice, "they're not the enemy. They're just children." "And I'd do it again." The officer opened his mouth to argue, but the station groaned loudly as another explosion tore through the structure. There was no time left. With an angry gesture, the officer waved them forward. "Fine, get on the dropship. But this isn't over, Ward." Elias didn't care. He guided the children onto the ship, sitting with them as the engines roared to life. The dropship lifted off, leaving the dying station behind. As the stars stretched into view outside the small windows, Elias sat quietly. The children huddled near him, still frightened, but safe. For a brief moment, the war seemed far away. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know what his superiors would do. But deep inside, he knew one thing for certain. He had made the only choice he could live with. And somewhere, far from the battlefield, an alien mother would soon learn that a human soldier had protected her young. The journey back to the human fleet was silent. Captain Elias Ward sat inside the dropship, his armor dented and covered in ash, his hands resting on his knees. Across from him, the 5 young Varenians huddled together. Their large, glassy eyes never left him. They were still afraid, but not of him. Their eyes carried a strange mix of fear and trust. It was as if, in the middle of fire and chaos, Elias had become their shield, their only safe place. The other human soldiers kept their distance. Some stared with open disapproval, others whispered quietly among themselves. No one dared to speak too loudly. Everyone knew what Elias had done would not be forgotten easily by command. Saving the enemy's young was not part of the mission. It was the kind of act that started arguments, even among friends. When the dropship landed inside the human carrier, the hangar crew rushed forward. At first, they cheered for the returning soldiers. But when they saw the alien younglings stepping out, escorted by armed humans, the cheers turned into shocked silence. "What is this?" one officer demanded. "Why are they here?" Elias stood tall, his tired eyes calm but steady. "They were trapped in the burning station. I brought them out." The officer frowned, clearly angry, but before more words could be spoken, the order came through the intercom. "All non-essential personnel clear the hangar. Command will handle this." The soldiers and crew pulled back, leaving Elias with the children under heavy guard. The young Varenians clung together, whispering in their strange, melodic language. Their voices trembled, but every time the soldiers raised their weapons a little too high, the children shifted closer to Elias. Hours later, after long arguments behind closed doors, a decision was made. A temporary ceasefire was arranged with the Varenians, not for peace, but for exchange. The younglings would be returned to their people. Elias would be present at the handover, since they refused to leave his side. The meeting was arranged on a neutral moon, its surface cold and gray. A wide landing zone had been marked, and both fleets hovered in orbit above, ready in case the fragile agreement broke. Elias stood at the edge of the human side, his armor polished now but still scarred from the last battle. The Varenian children stayed behind him, peeking out nervously. Human soldiers lined up at his back, while across the clearing, Varenian warriors appeared, tall and striking with their scaled armor and glowing eyes. Then she came, Serenia, the Varenian. Matriarch walked with quiet authority, her tall form draped in flowing robes made of shimmering threads that caught the faint light of the moon. Her eyes were the deep silver of her people, but there was a warmth in them that softened her stern face. Every step she took carried dignity, yet the moment she saw the children, her pace quickened. The young Varenians cried out in relief, rushing past Elias into her arms. She knelt, gathering them close, murmuring in their language words that carried comfort and love. For a long moment, she held them tightly, as if to make sure they were real and safe. When at last she rose, her gaze turned to Elias. The human captain straightened instinctively. He expected anger. He expected accusations. But instead, Serenia approached slowly, her expression unreadable. "You," she said at last, her voice soft but carrying power. "It was you who brought them out of the fire." Elias inclined his head respectfully. "Yes, I couldn't leave them behind." There was silence between them. The human commanders behind Elias shifted uncomfortably, expecting some kind of protest or demand. But Serenia's eyes did not leave him. They studied him with a strange intensity, as if she was searching for something deeper than words. Among her people, such an act was not ordinary. To risk one's life for another's children, especially the children of an enemy, was more than courage. It was a vow, a bond stronger than any treaty. At last, Serenia spoke again, her voice low but steady. "Among the Varenians, to protect, young not of your blood is a sacred act. It is a promise that cannot be broken. You have saved what is most precious to me." Elias felt the weight of her words. He tried to speak humbly. "I only did what any decent man should do. They were innocent." Serenia's gaze softened, but her tone grew even more certain. "No, Captain Elias Ward. What you did was not ordinary. You have become more than a soldier in this war. To my children, you are now protector. And to me, you are bound." Her declaration stunned both sides. The human commanders exchanged shocked looks. The Varenian warriors bowed their heads in quiet respect. Elias blinked, trying to understand. "Bound?" he repeated. "It means," Serenia said, stepping closer, "that you are part of their family now. You are father in spirit, whether human or Varenian. And what is bound by blood or by sacrifice cannot be undone." Elias's breath caught. He hadn't expected this. He had only wanted to do the right thing to keep children alive. But now that simple act had carried him into something far larger. His commanders whispered furiously behind him, one of them even hissing, "This is nonsense! He is a human officer, not—" But Serenia silenced them with a single glance. Her presence was commanding, and even the human officers fell quiet. She turned back to Elias. "I will not force you," she said with surprising gentleness. "But know this. In our eyes, in the eyes of my children, you are already chosen. If you walk away, they will still remember you as father. If you accept, you will be honored among us forever." Elias looked past her at the children. They stood behind her now, but their eyes were still on him, hopeful, trusting, unwilling to let go. He felt torn. He was a soldier, sworn to duty and bound by human command. But here, in this quiet moment on a gray moon, he realized his decision had already changed the course of 2 lives, maybe even 2 worlds. Finally, Elias bowed his head slightly. "I will not turn my back on them." Serenia's eyes softened, and for the first time, A faint smile touched her lips. "Then you are already one of us." The meeting ended with the exchange, but not with the usual cold handshakes of war. Instead, Serenia touched her hand lightly to her heart and then extended it toward Elias, a Varenian gesture of respect and bond. Without hesitation, Elias copied the movement, placing his hand to his chest and returning the gesture. The children's faces lit up with relief. For them, the bond was already sealed, and so, with one choice, Elias Ward's life was changed forever. He was no longer just a captain of humans. He was something else now, something far greater, and perhaps far more dangerous in the eyes of those who still clung to war. He returned to his human fleet expecting questions, maybe even punishment, but what he found was something more complicated. Everywhere he went, soldiers stared at him. Some looked at him with respect for his courage. Others looked with suspicion. Whispering behind his back, "He saved alien children," one soldier muttered in the mess hall. "Enemy children," another corrected sharply. "He risked all of us for them," a third added, shaking his head. Elias ate his meals quietly, pretending not to hear. But he heard every word. His act of mercy had divided his own people. Command called him into a private meeting soon after. A stern admiral with cold eyes leaned forward across the table. "Captain Ward, do you understand what you've done? The Varenians now consider you part of their family. That could be dangerous. To them, it is a sacred bond. To us, it looks like betrayal." Elias kept his voice steady. "I saved children. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" the admiral snapped. "You've tied yourself to an alien matriarch. Do you even understand their customs? They might claim you belong to them now. That could compromise your loyalty to this fleet, to Earth." Elias stayed silent. Deep inside, he knew the admiral was partly right. He hadn't understood the full weight of Serenia's words on the moon. To him, saving children was simple. To her people, it had become something far greater. Not long after, an unexpected message came. The Varenians requested Elias's presence in their capital world. Serenia herself had sent the invitation, explaining that her people wished to honor him for his protection of the young. The admiral resisted. "You can't go. This could be a trap." But political pressure grew. If Elias refused, it might be seen as an insult, perhaps even as an attack on the fragile truce. Finally, the decision was made. Elias would go, but under careful watch. And so, he found himself aboard a Varenian ship days later, its halls filled with glowing light and strange, flowing designs. The Varenians welcomed him not with suspicion, but with reverence. Soldiers saluted him, not as an enemy, but as if he were already one of them. Children bowed their heads respectfully when he passed. It unsettled him. When the ship landed on the Varenian homeworld, Elias's breath caught. The capital city stretched beneath a sky of violet and silver. Towering crystal-like structures rose into the clouds, connected by bridges of light. Gardens bloomed in colors he had never seen before, their leaves humming softly as if alive with music. The streets were filled with people moving gracefully, their scaled skin shimmering under the twin suns. Elias felt out of place, his dark human armor heavy among so much elegance. Serenia met him at the grand entrance of the palace. Her presence was the same as before, calm, dignified, commanding. But now, there was something gentler in her eyes. "You came," she said. "I didn't have much choice," Elias admitted, though not unkindly. Serenia's lips curved in a faint smile. "Choice or not, you are here. That is enough." Inside the palace, Elias was introduced to the Council of Elders. They questioned him politely but firmly. "Why did you risk your life for our young?" one asked. "Did you hope for reward?" another demanded. "Was it pity or honor?" Elias answered simply, "They were children. I don't need another reason." The council murmured among themselves. Some seemed doubtful, but others nodded with approval. For Varenians, protecting young was not just kindness, it was sacred. His answer carried weight. After the meeting, Serenia guided him through the palace. "Our people will take time to understand," she said softly. "But my children already trust you. That is enough for me." Elias hesitated. "Serenia, among my people, what I did was simple. But among yours, it means something much bigger. I don't know if I can carry that." She stopped, turning to face him. Her silver eyes studied him carefully. "You already carry it. Whether you accept it or not, you are part of my family now. My children call you protector. That cannot be undone." Elias looked away, troubled. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't wanted honor or bond. He had only wanted to do what was right. The days that followed were filled with learning. Serenia insisted that Elias spend time with her children. At first, he felt awkward, uncertain how to behave. But the younglings clung to him, following him through the palace gardens, asking questions in broken human words. "Why did you save us?" one asked. "Because no one else could," Elias said gently. "Does that mean you are our father now?" another asked innocently. Elias froze. He didn't know how to answer. But the joy in their eyes told him that in their hearts, the answer was already yes. Outside the palace, things were not so simple. Many Varenians welcomed Elias with respect, bowing their heads when he passed. But not all. Some warriors glared at him with open suspicion. Some elders whispered that a human had no place in their sacred customs. At the same time, messages from the human fleet grew colder. Command demanded regular reports. Some accused him of being manipulated. Others feared he would betray human secrets. Elias found himself caught between two worlds, one that doubted him and another that wanted to claim him as their own. One evening, he stood on a high balcony of the palace, looking out over the glowing city. The air was warm, carrying a faint music from the gardens below. Serenia joined him quietly. "You are troubled," she said. Elias nodded. "Your people see me as family. My people see me as a traitor. I don't know where I belong anymore." Serenia's gaze was steady. "Perhaps you belong in both. Perhaps you are the bridge between us." Elias gave a dry laugh. "A bridge is walked on from both sides. It doesn't get to rest." Serenia tilted her head, studying him. "A bridge also connects what was once divided. Without it, there is only distance." Her words stayed with him long after she left. He realized she was right. His act on the burning station had already changed the path of two species. Whether he wanted it or not, he was now the link between them. But not everyone was ready for that link. As the twin suns set over the shining city, Elias noticed shadows moving in the distance. Not everyone welcomed him. Some still wanted war. And he knew deep inside that his greatest trials were only just beginning. The palace of the Varenians was filled with whispers. Word of the human captain who saved the young had spread across the city. Some saw him as a hero, a sign of hope. Others believed he was an outsider who had stepped into a place where he did not belong. Serenia understood her people well. She knew respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned. That was why she summoned Elias to the Hall of Echoes one morning. The chamber was vast, its walls carved from crystal that shimmered, like water under sunlight. The council of elders waited inside, their faces grave. Serenia stood among them, her silver eyes calm, yet there was weight in her tone. "Captain Elias Ward," she said, her voice carrying across the hall, "you protected my children in the fire, and for that you are bound to us. But for my people to accept you, you must prove more than courage. You must prove you understand what it means to protect, to guide, and to stand as family." Elias felt every eye on him. "What do you ask of me?" The eldest counselor rose, leaning on a staff that glowed faintly with embedded crystals. "The trials," he said simply. "If you wish to be accepted, you must face them." Elias didn't know what that meant, but he nodded. "I'll face them." The first trial was called the Trial of Patience. He was led into a great garden filled with tall, humming plants that released thick clouds of sweet-smelling mist. The task was simple: guide Serenya's children through the garden to the far gate. The difficulty was that the garden shifted, paths closed, walls of plants moved, and the mist clouded sight. The younglings grew restless quickly. "We're lost!" one cried. "The plants will trap us!" another whimpered. Elias knelt beside them, his voice calm. "We'll find the way. Stay close. Breathe slowly. Don't be afraid." For hours they wandered. The children grew tired, but Elias never raised his voice or lost his calm. When they stumbled, he lifted them. When they grew frightened, he told them stories from Earth, tales of rivers, forests, and skies with only one sun. Slowly the fear faded, replaced by trust. When they finally reached the far gate, the elders were waiting. They had watched the whole trial from above. One of them nodded silently. Elias had passed the first test. The second trial was harder. It was called the Trial of Wisdom. Elias was placed in a chamber with puzzles carved into the walls, symbols, and patterns that glowed faintly when touched. The children sat in the center, watching nervously. The rule was simple. He had to solve the puzzles to open the door, or they would remain trapped. The Varenians valued not just strength, but the ability to think, to teach, and to guide others. Elias studied the glowing patterns, trying to make sense of them. He wasn't a scholar of alien languages, but he was a soldier who had solved problems under pressure many times. Slowly, he traced the patterns, realizing they were connected to sounds. "Listen," he told the children. "Each symbol makes a tone. If we put them in the right order, it will open." Together, they experimented, pressing symbols, listening to the tones, and arranging them into a melody. The children laughed when they made mistakes, and Elias encouraged them to try again. After many attempts, they created a smooth, rising song. The door opened with a gentle hum. The council watched from above. The elder who had doubted him most whispered, "He teaches as he protects. Perhaps there is truth in Serenya's bond." The third and final trial was the most dangerous, the trial of courage. Elias was brought to an arena of stone. The children stood behind a barrier while he was placed in the center. From the gates emerged a beast native to the Varenian wilds, a towering creature with armored hide and burning eyes. It was not meant to kill him, but to test his resolve. The beast roared, shaking the ground. Elias raised his weapon, then stopped. He remembered Serenya's words. To protect is not always to fight. He lowered the weapon. Instead of attacking, he spread his arms wide, standing firm between the beast and the children. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. "You want me?" he shouted at the creature. "Not them! Come for me!" The beast charged, dust rising under its massive feet. Elias braced himself, ready for the impact. At the last moment, a deep horn echoed across the arena. The beast stopped, its head lowering. The trial was over. The elders rose to their feet. Even the doubters could not deny what they had seen. Elias had faced fear without retreat, not for himself, but for the children. That evening, the palace was filled with quiet celebration. Serenya's children clung to Elias, their eyes glowing with admiration. "You are truly our protector," one whispered. "You are family now," another said softly. Elias felt a warmth in his chest he could not explain. He had fought many battles for orders, for strategy, for survival. But this was different. For the first time, he felt he was fighting for something far greater than war. Serenya met him in the garden after the ceremonies. The twin suns painted the sky in gold and violet. She stood tall, her silver eyes reflecting the light. "You have passed the trials," she said, her voice carrying both pride and relief. "The council accepts you, my people accept you, and my children already love you." Elias looked at her, weary but steady. "I only did what was needed." Serenia shook her head gently. "No, you did more. You showed patience when anger was easier. You taught when silence was safer. You stood when fear told you to run. That is not only what is needed. That is what is rare." For the first time, Elias allowed himself to smile faintly. "And what happens now?" Serenia's gaze softened. "Now you are truly bound. My people will see you as father to my young. And I will stand beside you as mother." The weight of her words sank into Elias's heart. He had come as a soldier, but step by step, trial by trial, he had become something else. Not just a protector, not just an outsider tolerated by another world, but a bridge. A living bond between two families, two peoples, two futures. As the stars rose over the Varenian sky, Elias realized that his life had changed forever. And though the war still loomed on the horizon, he now carried something worth fighting for beyond orders or flags. He carried family. For weeks after the trials, Captain Elias Ward lived among the Varenians. He trained with their soldiers, learned their customs, and spent hours in the gardens with Serenia's children. The younglings had grown less afraid, their laughter echoing through the palace halls. For the first time in years, Elias began to feel something like peace. But then, the news came. A messenger arrived at the palace, pale and breathless. He bowed quickly to Serenia, his voice shaking. "Matriarch, a new fleet has entered our space. They are not human. They are not Varenian. They burn every world they touch." The council was summoned at once. The elders gathered in the great chamber, their faces grim. The messenger continued, "They call themselves the Craven. They take no prisoners. They destroy everything." Elias stood at Serenia's side, listening carefully. This was not the first time he had heard the name. Humans had encountered the Craven before. Ruthless raiders with massive warships, they thrived on chaos. Now they had come here. Serenia's eyes turned to Elias. "What do you know of them?" Elias's jaw tightened. "They don't care about alliances. They attack the weak, the unprepared. If we don't stop them together, they will crush us one by one." The council murmured uneasily. Some looked at Elias with doubt. One elder raised his voice. "Why should we listen to a human? Perhaps this is a trick. Perhaps his people brought this threat to frighten us into alliance." Serenia silenced him with a sharp look. "Enough. He has proven his loyalty." Then she turned back to Elias. "What do you suggest?" Elias drew a slow breath. He felt the weight of every eye in the chamber. "We cannot fight this enemy alone. Humans and Varenians must work together. If we fail to unite, we will both fall." 2 days later, Elias stood on a warship's command deck. For the first time, human and Varenian officers stood side by side, their uneasy eyes glancing at each other. The alliance was fragile, but the threat outside the stars gave them no choice. The Craven fleet had already destroyed 2 colonies. Their ships were enormous, dark shapes with jagged edges, moving like predators through space. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted, only that they left nothing but ruin behind. Serenia joined Elias on the command deck. Her presence calmed the Varenians, while Elias's steady orders gave confidence to the humans. Slowly, both sides began to follow his lead. "Enemy fleet closing," a Varenian officer reported. Elias studied the displays. The Craven ships were spreading into attack formation. He clenched his fists. Evacuate the nearby settlements. Protect the civilians first. We'll hold the line until they're clear. Some human commanders grumbled. You're risking the fleet for aliens. Elias turned sharply, his voice cold. No, I'm risking it for people. If we can't stand together now, then everything I've done means nothing. His words cut through the tension. The orders were followed. The first clash was brutal. The Kraven ships unleashed beams of crackling energy that tore through shields. The joint fleet struggled to respond, human and Varenian ships moving awkwardly together, not yet used to fighting as one. Elias barked commands, directing formations with sharp precision. Pull the frigates to the left flank. Varenian cruisers. Cover their retreat. Focus fire on the lead destroyer. Slowly, painfully, the joint fleet began to move as one. Human ships provided speed and maneuverability, while Varenian vessels delivered heavy strikes. Together, they managed to destroy 2 Kraven ships, but the enemy kept coming. Amid the chaos, Elias received a desperate report. One of the evacuation ships is trapped. Engines damaged. His heart sank. Serenya's children were aboard that ship, being evacuated to safety. Without hesitation, Elias made his choice. Cover me. I'm going in. He boarded a small fighter craft, pushing its engines to the limit. The battlefield was a storm of fire and debris, but Elias cut through it with skill born from years of combat. His ship weaved past enemy blasts until he reached the evacuation vessel. It was crippled, spinning slowly. Inside, the frightened voices of children echoed over the comms. Hold on, Elias said, his voice steady despite the danger. I'm here. He docked his fighter, forcing the damaged systems back online long enough to stabilize the engines. Enemy ships closed in, firing wildly. Elias threw every ounce of strength into keeping the vessel moving, guiding it toward the safety. Elias! Serenya's voice rang in his ear over the comm. You cannot do this alone. I won't let them die, Elias replied firmly. Not again. With help from nearby Varenian fighters, the evacuation ship finally escaped the battlefield, jumping to safety. By the time Elias returned to the flagship, the battle was turning. With the civilians safe, the joint fleet fought back with renewed strength. Humans and Varenians covered each other's weaknesses, learning quickly, adapting. Together, they destroyed the last of the Kraven ships, forcing the survivors to flee back into the dark of space. The battlefield was scarred, ships burned and broken, but the people were alive. And for the first time, humans and Varenians had fought side by side not as enemies, but as allies. When the battle ended, Serenya found Elias in the medical wing. His armor was scorched, his body bruised, but he was alive. She stood silently for a moment, then spoke softly. You saved them again. Not just my children. You saved all of us. Elias leaned back on the bed, weary but calm. We saved them. Together. Serenya's eyes shone with quiet pride. The Council will no longer doubt you. They cannot. You have led us through fire twice. To my people, you are no longer just a protector. You are a leader. Elias shook his head. I never wanted to be a leader, Serenya smiled faintly. The greatest leaders are often those who never asked to be. But you are more than that now, Elias. You are proof that our worlds can stand as one. That night, the palace was filled with voices singing in honor of the victory. Humans and Varenians shared food, stories, and laughter, though many still looked at each other with unease. The wounds of old wars did not vanish in a single battle, but Elias saw something new, a spark of hope. A possibility that perhaps the bond he had formed with Serenya's family could grow into something larger, something that would change the future of both species. And as he stood on the balcony once more, watching the stars, he knew the war with the Kraven was far from over. They would return, stronger, hungrier, but next time, humanity and the Varenians would be ready, because now they were no longer enemies. They were family. The ruins of the battlefield still floated across the stars. Burned ships drifted in silence, reminders of how close both humans and Varenians had come to destruction. Even in victory, the cost had been heavy. Elias Ward knew this peace was only the beginning of a harder path. The Kraven would return, and when they did, it would test the fragile alliance he had fought to create. In the weeks that followed, Elias found himself caught between two worlds. The humans looked at him as a man who had chosen aliens over his own kind. The Varenians saw him as the strange outsider who had become a savior. To Elias, neither title felt right. He had only done what needed to be done: protect the children, protect the innocent, stand where others would not. Yet one thing was clear: both sides now listened to him. The Varenian Council invited him to strategy sessions, their elders now speaking his name with respect rather than suspicion. Human commanders sent reports directly to him, often asking for his advice before taking action. It was a strange, uneasy power. Elias had never wanted leadership, but leadership had found him. One evening, Serenia came to him as he stood on the balcony overlooking the Varenian city. The setting suns painted the towers in gold and violet light. "You have changed my people," Serenia said softly. Elias turned to her. "I didn't do it alone." "You gave us something we had lost," she continued. "Trust. A reason to believe in others again. That is no small gift." Elias looked out at the city below. "It won't last unless both our peoples keep working together. Old wounds don't heal overnight." Serenia studied him carefully. Her expression was thoughtful, but her eyes were warm. "That is why we need someone who stands in both worlds, someone who can remind us of what we can become." He frowned slightly. "You mean me?" "Yes," she said. "You have become more than a guest, more than a soldier. To my children you are a protector. To my council you are a guide. And to me—" She paused, her voice quiet but firm. "To me, you are family." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Elias felt the weight of them, the responsibility and the bond behind them. He had come to protect, not to belong. But now, he realized he belonged more than he had ever expected. The months that followed were filled with hard work. Humans and Varenians began building joint fleets, their engineers working side by side to combine technology. Trade routes were established between their worlds, and students traveled across the stars to learn from each other's cultures. It was not easy. There were arguments, mistrust, and sometimes even open defiance. But whenever tensions grew too sharp, Elias stepped in. He spoke not as a commander, but as someone who had stood in the fire and chosen both sides. His words calmed storms before they could break into war. The younglings, Serenia's children, became symbols of this new bond. Human children played alongside them in the palace gardens, laughing in mixed voices. To the older generation, it seemed strange, but to the young, it was natural. And Elias realized this was how the future began. Not with treaties signed in, silence, but with children laughing together without fear. Yet peace was never safe for long. Scouts returned with reports of Kraven ships gathering again at the edge of known space. Larger fleets, heavier weapons. They were not retreating, they were preparing. A great council was called. Both human and Varenian leaders gathered in the vast chamber of the palace. The tension was sharp. Many feared the fragile alliance would collapse under the weight of fear. Elias stood at the center, looking at them all. His voice was steady as he spoke. "You know what is coming. The Kraven will return. They will not stop until they destroy us both. But we have already proven something. To them and to ourselves. When humans and Varenians fought together, we won. Not because we were stronger, but because we were united. If we stand apart, they will crush us. But if we stand together, there is nothing in this galaxy that can break us. The chamber was silent. Then Serenia rose, her voice carrying with calm authority. He speaks the truth. Elias Ward saved my children when I could not. He saved our worlds when we could not. If even he, a human soldier who once fought against us, believes we can build a future together, then I will believe it too. And I ask all of you to believe with me. One by one, the leaders nodded. Slowly, the room filled with agreement. For the first time, true unity seemed possible. That night, as the council's decision spread across the city, Elias walked alone through the gardens. The stars shone brightly overhead, endless and waiting. Serenia joined him once more. Her presence, quiet but strong. "You have done more than protect," she said. "You have built a bridge. My children will grow in a world that is different because of you." Elias smiled faintly. "A world where they don't have to fear the word enemy," she nodded. "A world where you are not just their protector, but their father in spirit." Elias was silent for a moment, then said softly, "If they will have me, then I will be that." Serenia's eyes softened, and for the first time in many years, Elias felt the weight of his past lift. He had lost so much in war, but here, among those he once called enemies, he had found something worth living for again. When the Kraven returned, the galaxy would be ready. Humans and Varenians would meet them not as divided races, but as one people. And at the center of that alliance stood a soldier who had begun as a protector of children and become something greater. Not just a soldier, not just a leader, but the bridge that carried two worlds into a shared future. And as Elias looked out at the stars, he knew that whatever battles lay ahead, humanity would always be remembered not for its wars, but for its heart, for its choice to protect, for its choice to be family.